Doamnelor și domnilor, bine v-am regăsit la Impact Plus, aici unde discutăm despre amenințările și despre războiul hibrid al Federației Rusă dus împotriva lumii democratice și civilizate. Georgia este din nou scena unor lupte violente în stradă, unde opoziția protestează împotriva unor alegeri locale pe care le numesc fraudate, iar autoritățile, ca de obicei, așa cum ne-au obișnuit în ultima perioadă, înnăbușă acestea în violențe. Astăzi discutăm cu Marika Mikiashvilli, care este secretar pentru relații externe al Paridului de orientare liberală DROA, care face parte din coaliția pentru schimbare din Georgia. Doamna Mikiashvilli este și lector la Universitatea din Tbilisi, specialist în amenințări hibride și probleme de securitate în spațiul Europei centrale și de est și în Asia Centrală. Ms. Mikiashvilli, good afternoon and thank you very much for your accepting our interview.
Good afternoon, it's my pleasure.
So, my first question, tell me please what is the situation now in Georgia, because we saw a lot of news about new protests and new repressions against the opposition after the local election. What is the real situation now in Georgia?
Yes, the current situation in Georgia is seriously alarming. The repressions are deepening and there's complete lawlessness reigning currently in Georgia. However, it's remarkable that the protesters and the people of Georgia are resilient through all the challenges thrown at us by the Russian regime in Georgia.
So during these protests, we saw that the people are using the flag of Republic of Moldova waved in the streets. Tell me please, what are people speaking or mind about the election that it's finished in Moldova on 28th of September?
Yes, on October the 1st, there was the Moldova's pro-Western victory march in Georgia. Usually when our friend or partner countries achieve some victory or when they demonstrate some support towards Georgia, such as through imposing targeted sanctions, there are lots of relevant flags or marches dedicated to our friendly countries. And in this case, Georgian people were so happy with the victory of freedom in Moldova that they dedicated the march to Moldova. And I want to use the opportunity to congratulate the people of Moldova on the very right choice. And it happened to Georgia. We see what happened to Georgia, that we have probably the fastest consolidating dictatorship in the history of modern Europe, maybe if not beyond. And Moldova cannot allow a Trojan horse Russian special operation to take control over their country through elections, because that is what happened in Georgia back in 2012, and we see what is happening now. Once you have Russians in your governance, then it is extremely hard to get rid of them. So congratulations once again, and I want to say that for the people of Georgia, Moldova's victory is extremely encouraging and inspiring, because we see that now Georgia is the last stronghold of Russia in the entire wider region, and it gives us further motivation to resist them.
So did Russia try to influence or did influence the election in Georgia, the local election, because we saw the tentatives of influence in Moldova? But they did not have a success here in Moldova. What is the situation in Georgia?
The situation in Georgia is that Russians are in power. They're not in opposition. They have entire state resources, entire financial resources. For example, Georgia is a hyper-centralized state, and even in terms of funding, the dictator oligarch that came to power in 2012, back then his personal wealth compared to Georgia's GDP was 35%. He had the assets worth 35% of Georgia's GDP. Currently, it's a little lower, but still, you can imagine his entire network. So in Georgia, compared to Moldova, in Georgia, Russians are in governance, not in opposition. That is why it is extremely hard to battle them. And yes, of course, they influence elections because Russians conduct elections in Georgia. They don't just manipulate elections, they conduct elections. Both last year's parliamentary elections, which saw around 14 or 15% of votes rigged on election day alone. I'm not even speaking about the manipulation before election day. And these local elections, they're also conducted by Russians in power. However, I want to underline that for the majority of democratic public in Georgia, the vast majority, these elections were not even a factor. The most democratic parties, we boycotted these elections. So our aim is to isolate the regime both at home and abroad, to have further targeted sanctions because the sanctions work. We have mounting evidence that it works, and to diversify non-violent protests and to help Georgian CSOs and independent media through funding because the regime suffocates them. So for that reason, the Georgian public, they saw participation in the local elections as cooperation with the regime, as normalization of this the status quo that's currently in Georgia, and as legitimizing the Russian regime. So for that reason, for us, these local elections were of very, very little importance, actually no importance at all. But otherwise, yes, it was conducted by Russians, which the Georgian Dream is a puppet of. And they wrote for themselves around up to 80% of votes. Or honestly speaking, I did not even check the precise election results because it is irrelevant to that level.
What narratives and what mechanisms did Russia using to maintain the influence in Georgia?
In Georgia, Russians have governance. So they have entire state apparatus and all the financial resources and everything basically. So Georgian people and the civil society organizations, political parties, independent media, we essentially fight the Russians with bare hands. Our only weapon is our numbers because Georgians are overwhelmingly pro-European. As you know, the polls always show support for EU integration at 80-85%. And it's also our deep national identity characteristic to rally for freedom of Georgia and to oppose the Kremlin influence and to advance Georgia's European aspirations. It's not just the 21st century thing for Georgia. European aspirations and European identity is a centuries and millennia-long thing. So this is essentially our only weapon, our endurance, our persistence, and our solidarity with each other. Russians, again, they have all the resources, plus that includes propaganda and so-called law enforcement, so security and violent apparatus. So these police, the crackdown police, which we call special forces, and the propaganda. And one of the key aspects of propaganda is, of course, the fear of war. They try to portray that if the Georgian Dream loses power and if opposition assumes power, the democratic forces, then immediately there will be war with Russia, and they are very openly attacking Western countries, that the West wants to drag Georgia into war with Russia. And by the way, the so-called prime minister, the illegitimate prime minister, he did not even congratulate Moldova on the victory in elections. He said that he will only congratulate Moldova after Moldova leaves the Commonwealth of Independent States. So they capitalize on this. Their smear campaign against Moldova is to demonstrate that seemingly Moldova is a sham. Moldova is not a serious success case because Moldova is, in their rhetoric, supposedly still tied with Russia covertly, and they did not congratulate Maia Sandu or the people of Moldova.
How far away is the European dream of Georgian people now, So you mentioned your position to go to European Union or not. How people are speaking now about the European dream of Georgia?
The people of Georgia still very much want European integration. And by the way, one of the reasons why we ask our partners to completely isolate the Georgian dream and not even shake hands with them is because the Georgian dream still manages to convince some parts of population that they are heading the country towards European Union. And the people of Georgia need full and complete clarity, because no regime in Georgia can ever maintain power if it's visible to everyone that they're not heading the country towards the European Union. So we need full clarity. European Union should be fully clear on who's responsible for distancing Georgia from the European Union. Currently, of course, with the current conditions, this is an ever impossible mission, because the Georgian dream regime and European integration of Georgia, and not even just European integration of Georgia, but Georgia's statehood, are incompatible with each other. It's either Georgians and Georgia as a country, or the Georgian dream. The two cannot coexist.
So tell me, please, how this party, Georgian Dream, can achieve a lot of votes? They're using manipulation, they're using maybe frauds, or how it's happened, but they declared always that they win the elections. And we speak here about local elections, but it was a parliamentary elections. They voted the president.
Yes, well, they came to power in 2012 with the promises of European integration. So in 2012, the Georgian people did not vote for anything pro-Russian or anti-European. They just wanted to change power. Then Mikhail Saakashvili's party, for domestic reasons, for just domestic grievances. And the Georgian Dream and the oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili won in 2012. Since then, they have never achieved. Since then and until 2024's completely rigged elections, they did not have even 50% of votes in parliamentary elections. For example, in 2016, they had 48%. But the tragedy is that Georgia has the mixed system, mixed proportional and majoritarian elections, something that happened in Hungary as well. And when they got 48% of proportional votes, they had constitutional majority in the parliament precisely through these majoritarian seats. And so the electoral system was a big problem. From what I know, that is not the case in Moldova, because you have fully proportional elections, from what I know. And that is good. And then also, Georgia is a hyper-centralized state. Municipalities are essentially slaves to the central government and Tbilisi, and that is a big problem. So essentially, if any party got around 45-48% back in 2016, they had everything in the country. And also, as I said, financial resources. For example, in Ukraine, there are multiple oligarchs, but in Georgia, there's only one oligarch, and his wealth is absolutely incomparable to anything else. So all these factors, and I will also say about the illusion of security of the people of Georgia. People of Georgia thought that, and also our Western partners thought that it is impossible to Russify Georgia. So I suppose the people and our Western partners, and unfortunately, some part of political class did not pay enough attention to the small steps that the regime was taking towards the authoritarian direction. And yes, our partners would say, when we would warn them that we were headed towards Belarus, they would say that we were just exaggerating and not being serious. So that is what happened. But as for 2024 elections and current so-called local elections, sham elections, these numbers are just not real. They had, in 2024, they had maximum around 40% of votes, and that was through intimidation or manipulation. whatever they do in Georgia with voters is very similar to what they do also to voters in Moldova. Some promises, some intimidation. Somebody's mother needs a cancer treatment. Somebody's father is in prison. So they intimidate people a lot. So they had around 40% through manipulation by election day. But on election day proper, through multiple voting scheme with the help of ID card fraud and technically assisted voting, they rigged around 14-15% of votes, and we have studies about it. The Russian election scientist Roman Udot also published his study about it, and the exit polls showed 40% of support for the Georgian dream. The government would be changing last year, but the Georgian dream wrote for themselves 54-55%. It is absolutely ridiculous because 54% is what they had in 2012. And they want us to believe that they have the same support in 2024. And now that they have up to 80% support in Tbilisi, where no one supports them through these local elections. So we see that they are simply writing up numbers like Alexander Lukashenko does. It is absolutely impossible to win against them in elections. And my party, the people of Georgia, we support isolating the regime both at home and abroad. We support diversified nonviolent protests and targeted sanctions, and this is the way to victory. We understand that, of course, we are headed to, our demand is new, free and fair parliamentary elections and the release of all political prisoners. And currently there are around 100 political prisoners already in Georgia. And by per capita, it's larger number than in Russia. Let that sink in. Georgia has a larger number of per capita political prisoners than Russia has. But to achieve these new free and fair elections, we understand that the regime has to be broken first, because the people must win before election day. So if they just conduct elections in current circumstances, all elections will be simply won by them through imagined numbers like Lukashenko does. But there should be a fundamental change, and the regime should break down, and then they should schedule new elections.
What happened in the parliamentary level? Because we know that the last election in the parliament was not recognized by opposition and they did not take in the mandates. What is the strategy of the opposition now in Georgia?
Yes, we all refused our parliamentary seats, and now the parliament of Georgia is a one-party parliament. This was one of the most important steps that democratic parties have ever done in Georgia, because this triggered the regime's isolation both at home and abroad, and they are very, very bothered with isolation. It is evident in everything they do. They have a very sharp lack of legitimacy, and whenever they find some European official in corridors, they quickly shake hands with them, and their propaganda media spreads it triumphantly that, see, we are legitimate. So this was our very successful strategy, I would say, and it was also very important for trust building between Georgia's democratic parties and the people of Georgia, because people of Georgia wanted that parties do not enter the legitimate parliament. They did not want the parties to cooperate with the regime, to normalize the fraud, and to essentially betray Georgia. So it was the first step towards trust building between parties and people. And then it was, of course, followed by the rest of democratic leaders. Currently, almost all democratic leaders are in jail. Out of maybe 10, 11 most prominent leaders, 9 are in jail. And they are now headed towards jailing the second layer of leaders. So they jailed the chairman, and now they are jailing the second layer of party leaders. This is the non-cooperation, the election, the boycott of the parliament still was the most important decision, and this is what triggered their international isolation, which is absolutely necessary for victory, however, not enough. And currently what we need is a better coordinated strategy internally on what we are doing next, how we are diversifying and magnifying the protests. Currently, yes, it is a very, very difficult period. It's a period of total crackdown and repressions. Very hopefully something new, some new forces, more effective coordination within democratic forces will emerge from this period.
So last week we spoke with our colleagues from Yerevan, and the people from Armenia told us Russia are losing now the Caucasus. Did Georgia stay pro-Russians, only one factor pro-Russians in Caucasus, in your region?
Currently, I would say that yes, Russia's only stronghold in the Caucasus is Georgia, and that is extremely concerning because eventually it is hard to maintain democracy in Armenia without a democratic Georgia also, because Armenia's most assured, guaranteed way towards European civilization, European institutions is through Georgian territory and the Black Sea. So it is crucial for Georgia to be democratic also for the future of Armenia. But at the moment, yes, Georgia is the only stronghold of Russia left. And Russia knows that, by the way, the difference from Plahotniuk's departure from Moldova is also that in Plahotniuk's case, Russia also did not insist on maintaining him in Moldova. And if I may say, that is because Russia thought that they could still find more people in Moldova to serve Russia, for example, Ilan Shor or others. It just happened, and I'm extremely happy about it, that Russia's plans failed, and then European forces took governance in Moldova. But Russia did not think that that would be happening, and they did not insist on Plahotniuk maintaining power. But in Georgia, Russia knows that there's absolutely no further social, cultural, or political foothold they could have in this country. They know that this is the absolutely last Russian governance in Georgia, and that is why they will be doing absolutely everything to maintain them in power.
What is the role of the church, Georgian Orthodox Church, in maintains this regime and the pro-Russian government?
Unfortunately, the vast majority of church administration, they are very comfortable with the regime and all the so-called post-Soviet, corrupt, nepotistic ways. Thankfully, there are individual very good bishops or priests who support the people of Georgia, support freedom, support Georgia's European future. But unfortunately, a lot of the time, church, they help spread the regime propaganda about war, about Europe wanting Georgia to become an LGBT country, and things like that. Unfortunately, they play quite a bad role currently, because it's again all tied with corruption, and the corruption in church has been exposed for quite a long time now. The process currently in Georgia, it's not just against one regime. It's an end to the former civil contract, and we are now in the process of birthing a new civil contract. And in New Georgia, the church's corrupt influences will be significantly diminished, and they know that. And that is precisely why it is not in their interest to to have the regime removed. But again, I want to thank the several very brave bishops and priests who stand with the people of Georgia.
And Ms. Mikiashvilli, my last question is, in Moldova, the pro-Russian forces are lost this election, parliamentary election, very important. From your point of view, can we be thankful that the pro-Russians are loose, or do you think that Moscow should attack us in the next time?
I think that Russia will never stop trying to get power in Moldova or elsewhere until Russia's defeat in Ukraine is unconditional and Russia is forced to abandon its imperial ambitions. Yes, I really think that Moldova just avoided a disaster, because you probably know, the Moldovan listeners, viewers of the program probably know that Georgia is and used to always be one of the most anti-Kremlin former Soviet republics. In the Georgian identity, Georgia's European identity has always been extremely strong, and Georgia was a success story in 2000s, in early 2010s. If Moscow could take over such a country and make it have a complete U-turn in just around 10-12 years, with a very accelerated speed of dictatorship in the last 12 months, then everything is possible. Georgia is a textbook, a playbook example of how to take over a country by a hostile power without even many noticing it. As I said, it's a Trojan horse. And I will just quote a British member of parliament from Labour Party, Perrin Moon, who last week at the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe said that what Putin did in Russia in 12 years, they did in Georgia in 12 months. So I advise the people of Moldova to always be extremely cautious. Do not ever assume that you're safe, because that would be an illusion and that could cost you a lot, and that is the case now in Georgia.
Ms. Mikiashvilli, thank you very much for the interview, and we hope that in Georgia will become again an example of democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our future is together, a prosperous, free European future, and long live Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine, and a free Belarus.
Doamnelor și domnilor, vă mulțumesc că ați fost alături de noi. Am discutat cu Marika Mikiashvilli, secretar pentru relații externe al Partidului Liberal de Opoziție DROA de la Tbilisi, care face parte din coaliția pentru schimbarea Georgiei, specialist în probleme de război hibrid și securitate în Europa Centrală și de Est și în Asia Centrală. La revedere, vă doresc o zi bună, numai bine!